You shouldn't have come. The stench of your cheap clothes is ruining my party. Those were the last words my brother's fiancée whispered to me before she deliberately emptied a glass of vintage Cabernet down the front of my white dress. The music died. The crowd gasped. Bianca stood there smirking, waiting for the tears. She wanted a scene. I gave her a countdown. I didn't wipe the stain. I didn't look for a napkin. I checked my watch. It was 6:02. I decided that by 6:05 this entire wedding would legally cease to exist. Before I tell you how I legally evicted my own brother's wedding party in under 180 seconds, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't run to the bathroom. I didn't reach for a tissue. I stood absolutely still, letting the red wine soak into the fabric, turning it cold and heavy against my skin. The crowd was waiting for the breakdown. They wanted the scene where the poor relation runs away sobbing, humiliated by the golden couple. I denied them that satisfaction. Bianca laughed, a light tinkling sound that was practiced to perfection. She snapped her fingers at a passing waiter, not even looking at him. Get her a napkin and maybe some club soda, though I doubt it will help that fabric. It looks like polyester. She dismissed me with a wave of her hand, turning her back to accept the coos of sympathy from her bridesmaids. That was when Denise, my brother's mother-in-law-to-be, stepped in. Denise works in human resources at a mid-sized tech firm. She handles people for a living, usually by firing them. She gripped my arm with a strength that belied her manicured nails. "Let's get you out of the sight line," she hissed, her smile tight and fake for the benefit of the onlookers. "We can't have you looking like a crime scene in the background of the first dance." She marched me away from the family table, away from the crystal centerpieces and the ocean view. She walked me past the guest tables, past the bar, all the way to the swinging metal doors of the kitchen. She pulled out a chair at a small, wobbly folding table tucked in the shadows. The vendor table. The DJ was there eating a cold sandwich. The photographer was changing a lens. This was where the help sat. "Stay here," Denise said, smoothing her dress. "And try not to speak to anyone important. We're doing you a favor by even letting you stay." I sat down. I looked across the room at my brother, Caleb. He was standing 10 feet away, holding a glass of champagne. He had watched his fiancée pour wine on me. He had watched his mother-in-law drag me away like an unruly child. He looked me right in the eye, took a sip of his drink, and turned his back. That was the moment the sadness died, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I looked at Bianca, glowing in the center of the room. Most people would think she was just a mean girl having a bad day. But I knew better. This was the predator's arithmetic. See, bullies like Bianca don't attack randomly. They do the math. When she walked into this room, she felt small. She was marrying into a family she thought was better than her, surrounded by money she didn't earn at a venue she couldn't afford. She felt insecure. So she scanned the room for a resource she could consume to build herself up. She saw me. She saw the $12 dress I'd bought at a thrift store because I didn't care about fashion. She saw the quiet sister who never raised her voice. She calculated that I was the path of least resistance. By destroying me publicly, she wasn't just being cruel. She was establishing dominance. She was showing my brother, her family, and every guest that she was the alpha, and I was the stepping stone. It was a calculation, a primitive, brutal equation of power. But Bianca made a fatal error in her math. She assumed that because I was quiet, I was weak. She assumed that because I sat at the vendor table, I was a servant. She forgot that in the hospitality industry, the vendor table is the most dangerous place in the room because that's where the people who actually run the show sit. I picked up the linen napkin from the table. I didn't use it to wipe my dress. I unfolded it on my lap. I watched the staff moving around the room. My staff. I checked my watch again. 6:04. Time to correct the equation. I sat there invisible in the shadows of the kitchen doors, watching my brother raise a toast to his beautiful, cruel bride. They looked at me and saw a failure, a sister who couldn't afford a decent dress, a girl who had settled for a small life while they chased greatness. They had no idea that they were standing on my dirt. I don't work as an assistant. I don't work in hospitality management. I specialize in distressed commercial real estate. I hunt for dying properties, resorts drowning in debt, hotels facing bankruptcy, assets that banks are desperate to offload, and I buy them for pennies on the dollar. Then I fix them. I bought Obsidian Point 2 years ago when it was nothing but a crumbling liability and a lawsuit waiting to happen. I turned it into the most exclusive venue on the coast. I never told them. I kept my mouth shut in my car cheap because I knew exactly who they were. I knew that if Caleb knew I had money, he wouldn't see a sister. He would see a line of credit. I watched Bianca spin in the center of the dance floor, her dress sweeping across the polished hardwood I had paid to restore. She looked radiant. She looked expensive. And suddenly, the invisible ledger opened in my mind. It's a specific kind of accounting only the scapegoat of the family understands. I looked at the crystal flutes in their hands, overflowing with vintage champagne. I remembered sitting in my studio apartment 3 years ago wearing 2 sweaters because I couldn't afford to turn on the heat. I was eating instant noodles for dinner for the 20th night in a row. Not because I was broke, but because I had just wired $4,000 to my parents to stop the bank from taking their house. I lived in the cold so they could sleep in the warm. I looked at Caleb laughing as he loosened his silk tie. I remembered the day he started his business. He needed seed money. Dad called me begging. I emptied my savings account, money I had set aside for a down payment on my own life, and sent it to him. I drove a car with a taped-up window for 2 years so Caleb could drive a BMW to client meetings. I looked back at Bianca, sneering at me from across the room, judging the fabric of my dress. She sees a stain. I see the price of their survival. I realized then that my silence hadn't been humility. It had been a mistake. I had starved myself to feed people who would mock me for being hungry. I had built a kingdom in the dark to protect them, and they used the shadows to hide me away. The ledger was full. The debt was due. I pulled my phone out of my clutch. I didn't open social media. I opened the internal management app for the resort. I saw the event status active. I saw the client name, Caleb and Bianca. I scrolled down to the contract section. I didn't need to read it. I wrote it, Clause 14B, the Morality and Harassment Protocol. It was a clause I inserted into every contract after a particularly abusive groom assaulted a waiter last year. It gave ownership the unilateral right to terminate an event immediately if the client or their guests harassed, abused, or threatened staff or management. Bianca had just poured wine on the owner. I looked at the head of security, a man named Marcus, who was standing by the main exit looking bored. I sent him one text message, Code 14B, the bride execute immediately. Marcus looked at his phone. He looked at me. His eyes went wide. He tapped his earpiece and started moving toward the stage. I stood up from the vendor table. I didn't smooth my dress. I walked past the photographer, past the DJ, and stepped onto the stage. The music died. The room went silent. It was time to introduce myself. The room didn't just go quiet, it went dead. I climbed the 3 steps to the raised platform where the DJ was busy mixing a top 40 hit. He saw me coming, a wine-stained woman with a look of absolute zero on her face, and opened his mouth to tell me to get lost. He never got the chance. Marcus, my head of security, stepped out from the shadows. He's 6'4" and built like a linebacker. He simply nodded at the DJ and cut the power. The music died with a turntable screech that made half the room wince. Then the house lights slammed on full brightness, harsh and unforgiving. The romantic dim ambience vanished, replaced by the stark reality of a conference room. "Hey!" Bianca shrieked from the dance floor, shielding her eyes against the sudden glare. "Who turned on the lights? DJ, what are you doing?" I took the microphone from the stand. It gave a high-pitched feedback whine that made everyone cover their ears. "He's following orders," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, steady and calm. "And so are you." Bianca spun around, her eyes narrowing when she saw me standing center stage. "You!" She laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "Oh my God, she's drunk! Someone get the wine-soaked trash off the stage before she embarrasses herself." Denise marched toward the stage, her face twisted in that HR manager scowl she used right before firing someone. "Get down from there immediately, you little brat. I will have you banned from this property." "Actually, Denise," I said, my voice overriding hers, "you can't ban the person who signs the checks." I pulled my phone out and held it up, the screen glowing with the digital contract. "I am invoking Clause 14B of the venue rental agreement, the morality and harassment protocol," the room murmured. "What is she talking about?" someone whispered. Clause 14. B states that any physical or verbal harassment directed at the ownership team or staff is grounds for immediate, non-refundable termination of the event. I recited from memory. I looked straight at Bianca. "You poured wine on me. You called me poor. You humiliated me for sport." "So what?" Bianca yelled back, hands on her hips. "You're just the groom's loser sister. You aren't staff." "No," I corrected her. "I'm not staff. I'm the owner." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lung. Bianca blinked. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Denise froze mid-step. Caleb dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, but nobody looked at it. "I bought Obsidian Point 3 years ago," I continued, my voice ice cold. "I rebuilt it from the ground up. Every chair you're sitting on, every glass you're holding, the floor you're standing on, it's mine. And I have a zero-tolerance policy for bullies." I gestured to the exits where 6 uniformed security guards had just materialized, arms crossed. "Bianca, Denise, you have violated your contract. Your event is terminated effective immediately. You have 10 minutes to remove your personal belongings and vacate my property. If you are still here at 6:20, you will be escorted out by the sheriff for trespassing." I lowered the mic, clocks ticking. The room didn't calm. It detonated. Bianca shrieked and charged the stage, mascara streaking. "You liar, you jealous loser! You're broke and trying to ruin my wedding." Denise barreled behind her. "I work in HR. I know real power. I'll blacklist you from every venue and see you dry." I stayed still and watched high society melt. Then Caleb moved. He ripped the mic from my hand and shouted over the crowd, "Don't listen to her. My sister isn't well." His voice softened into false concern. "She's off her meds. She begged Dad for rent last week. She's delusional. She hates seeing me happy." The crowd shifted instantly, pity toward him, disgust toward me. "Security," he barked. "Get her out." Even my guards hesitated. He was the golden child. I was suddenly the unstable sister. I turned to leave, but Caleb blocked the exit, face inches from mine. "You're broke, Belinda. And tonight, I'm telling everyone where your money really comes from." He believed every word because Dad had lied to him too. "You really believe that?" I asked. "I know it," he sneered. "Let go," I warned, "or I foreclose." He faltered, confused. I walked to the DJ booth and cast my phone to the giant screen. Caleb and Bianca's photos vanished, replaced by a deed of trust. Borrower, Frank and Martha Sterling. Lender, Obsidian Holdings, Elsie. Status, delinquent. Gasps. I didn't beg Dad. I said I bought the mortgage when he begged me. A swipe revealed a second document. Caleb's business loan, 90 days past due. He went pale. You're the investor. I am the lender. I said I paid for your startup, your car, your ring, and this venue. I showed the ledger. 6 figures owed. I don't pay rent because I own the roof you live under. Silence. You have until Monday to apologize, or I file foreclosure. He ran, dragging Bianca with him. Denise tried to bluster, but security escorted her out. The guests stared at me differently now. Not the girl in a ruined dress, but the woman holding the deed to their dreams. I poured myself a glass of wine, savoring the quiet. I deleted Caleb, the mom, then Dad. They could stay in the house for now, but only because I allowed it. They would live each day under a roof built from my money, not my shame. The debt may stand, but the relationship is foreclosed. Sometimes power isn't given, it's bought.